Thank you. So, yesterday there was a great quote, and it was one of the presentations. He said, for safety, he said, focus on gravity and motion, right? Gravity and motion, two things that really got my attention. And you guys came up with another one that's probably going to hang on my wall that says increasing labor increases risk. Something that usually we put more manpower on a project to get things squared away when it's behind and not going to help, right? So simply a great presentation. I can't thank you enough for putting this together. I've got some questions that I probably want to go through here. Some of them came up in the chat, but I had a couple of my own as well. And so the first one goes to something I've encountered over the years is how do you tie these great practices, right? We used to call them additional provisions, but how do you tie them into the work? So the next time we build a data center, anybody builds a data center, they look at prefabrication or modular assembly, putting that together. I know we always have problems asking folks for means and methods, but you would almost think an owner could require some of these components to put their buildings together because they know it's safer and faster. So I'll offer this one up first, I think, to Justin, I think, on your thoughts on how to make this an obligation to a contractor versus just hope they do it.
Well, one is you can easily make it a requirement from an owner or from the GC levels, make it a requirement. But I think it all comes down to stem from is how do you partner well with your trade partners and the owner early to communicate what the need is and the whys behind it. And if we can get the trade partner buy-in early on and the commitment, because they have a lot, that's what they do. They have a lot of great ideas. And it comes from the craft too, right? So just how do we get involved early and with their leadership and any involvement early on? I think that ultimately you just got to get the buy-in and the passion for it. There's got to be a passion for not doing it the old way. It's got to be that continuous improvement. And once you get that culture cultivating, it's really easy then to get the trade partners and the owners bought in on it.
And I know from experience, Meta is a unique client, open to all kinds of innovations. And I'm going to throw this one to you, Jason. It's almost unfair, though, at some point with a new general contractor, subcontractor to say, hey, let's do it this way, right? Nothing better than planning a project before it's on paper. So Jason, are there interventions that we can make now on the next project so that a general contractor that may not be as nuanced into this approach understands what's expected?
Yeah, a couple of things I would highlight there. One would be something specific to the Meta program, of which both TJ and myself and Justin are part of. And that's that we get the opportunity to collaborate with one another, actually driven by our customer. So we on a regular basis share best practices, help each other out. And, safety is one of the things I've always said. We should never hide good practices from each other because there's no competitive reason to want anyone else in the industry to hurt people. And so Meta has created a platform for us to do that with some of the best builders in the world, in my mind. And so as we have new partners that join the program, part of that joining the program is to introduce them to the successes and some of the challenges we've had in certain circumstances specific to these manufactured products. So, what we shared on the screen was some of the things that have worked really well. There's other things, just like Thomas Edison would say, like we've tried 9,999 times and they haven't all worked out as well, but we have to share those types of things too. So it's building that culture where when new trade partners or new general contractors enter the program, we're always sharing.
And just to kind of pile onto that, TJ, currently right now, this is our quarterly meeting. I actually typically participate in it, but I couldn't for other reasons. But our teams, DPR, Turner, Holder, J.E. Dunn, Fortis, and Mortenson, and Hensel Phelps now, we're all collaborating at the Oregon site yesterday and today. And we meet once a month to share what, for instance, like right now, energy management's a big one that we're sharing lessons learned on. So this customer, the collaboration goes a long ways, whether it's a DFMA product or just something else of energy management. So that's been really fun just to watch that collaboration and sharing amongst some of the biggest builders in the country.
Yeah, and these are, for those on the call, these are world-class projects, right? The scope of these things is unimaginable if you're typically associated with a 30 or $40 million project, which brings up some different language, right? So earlier on, and Ed, thank you for bringing this up. You guys were talking about the five by five process. And I guess, Jason, if you could, can you go a little more into detail what that entails?
Yeah, I'm actually going to kick that to Justin because that's one of his personal passions is the 5S.
Cool. Go ahead.
So 5S, that's one thing I wanted to really, at the very end of the presentation, is what we have within Mortenson is what we've identified as our foundation, our culture foundation. And part of that, there's a three-pronged approach that we have with that, but 5S is one of those. And that is just really driving home a clean, organized project site. So with the 5S program, it's not just sweeping, it's keeping your areas organized. So on our projects, we require the trade partners getting them bought in on everything is on wheels inside the building. So no pallets. So everything is movable so that you can keep the area clean. No more than 3 days worth of material in your work area based off of our tax time schedule. Just once again, it's the overall cleanliness. It's just the most, if you have an organized, clean, organized site, it will be a safe site. If you walk into any site in the country and you see a little bit of disorganization or it's not clean, and if you were to go back and look, you would probably more than likely have schedule problems, safety problems, and quality problems. But if you have a clean, organized sites, you're more than likely going to have a good schedule, good safety and records, and quality is going to be very well. So the basis of the 5S is just so important to keep that clean, organized site. And once again, and if you do that out of respect for the craft, and they respect each other and your and the GC and the trade partners, then the quality goes even further because you're really improving that craft experience and working on the ultimate craft experience of what's great for them. And they love working in a clean environment. And so it goes a long ways.
Clean and comfortable. I noticed your concrete shop. I've been in form shops before at precast plants, and it's not a nice place to work at all. When I saw you guys putting together your grade beams, it's way too cool, right? Yeah. So the worker experience is something we don't talk a lot about on other construction projects, and we do in the meta world. And one of the questions came in on the Q&A here about meta, and specifically, how do they help both identify the risks on all of their projects, right? And how do they share them? And has that been successful? Can you answer that, Justin?
Yeah, we have multiple platforms. There's multiple pillars within that shares, but once again, each GC has a program team and within the program. And so there's a lot of collaboration with the program leads, with my peers in the field ops world, with the commissioning world, the quality pillar, the safety pillars, the commission, we all have those pillars and they all communicate well. They have summits. For instance, there's a summit this week for pre-construction, but there's summits for commissioning. Something big right now in lessons learned and sharing is lockout, tag out, and how we're identifying what's working, what's not working within the program. So ultimately, the sharing is going very well, and by doing so, it's Meta really encourages that. To answer your question, Meta encourages it and helps host it, and we also give them the feedback of what we're learning as well on our journey.
Yeah, cool. So I've been working Meta for almost 2 years now, and it's a different place to work. This whole collaborative approach, and it's not us versus the contractor, which I think is probably why you guys are making such progress at Mortenson. Just before I go on to the next question, so there's a follow-up question. I love this stuff. Follow-up question. Can't do that on Jeopardy. And actually, I misspoke. It was 5S, which I'm familiar with, not 5 by 5. And 5S is, I think, goes back to after World War II with Deming and sweeping, sorting, etc. But in the Mortenson world, after initiating 5S, how do you prove it was effective? Is there any kind of metric involved that would show decreasing and tripping injuries because there's no more crap on the floor, or what have you found?
I don't know what the actual statistics are, but I know that if I had that slide to pull up, we can show it because our senior lean director actually showed the statistics up that for every project that we have implemented 5S, that our incidents have came down significantly. We can share that number. We don't have it on hand right now unless Jason can grab it, but ultimately all the projects that are implementing 5S, our injuries have decreased significantly.
And I would expect that. And so one of the things I noticed on a job recently, a meta project, was a new way of working with conductors, putting into major switchgear is being done in the shop versus in the field. And when I asked the gentleman who was overseeing this beautiful shop, like an auto showroom where they were working, hey, is this any better and faster? And he said, well, in fact, we're doing this work 60% faster in this shop than in the field. And it's a whole lot easier to keep a shop, right? That's my first thought, right? You don't have stuff on the floor to move around. You don't have those big reels, et cetera. So let's move on to the next question. I think this is a very interesting one that we probably don't talk about enough, but the question is, if we move tasks to prefabrication shops from the field, are those same people that did the original tasks someone we can train and work in such a different setting? And I'm going to go to Jason for that because I know we're seeing this out at that DKL project.
Yeah, absolutely. We're taking a lot of our craft trades and allowing them to come into that facility to help manufacture these products. And the imagery that you saw in the videos that we shared, you saw images from two of our near site manufacturing facilities. And so these are, one is within a mile of our job site, the other is about 30 miles away. But so it becomes easy for us to bring craft into that environment from the job site. So as we're reducing labor on site, we're not just displacing that labor off the job, we're actually providing them work in a better, more ergonomic, safer place inside the factory. And one of the things I was going to say earlier, TJ, when you were asking about motivations and how do we get, how do we get people bought into this manufactured process? I think some of if we allow ourselves to listen to them, the craft will be the biggest cheerleaders for this approach. If you take the time and you ask the people actually doing the work, where would you rather build that duct bank? In a muddy trench on the site, fighting snow and mud and rain, or in a factory where you go to work every day, you're certain of the risks around you, you're certain of your work task, you can have pride in the things that you're doing in the place you're working in, almost to a person. The response we get is, I'd much rather be in that facility. It's not always the initial response because it's new, but once they have experienced that, you get a lot of response of, I would never want to go back. Like, this is great. I love working in this environment.
So kind of related to that and into the next question here was feedback from the folks that used to be wearing muddy boots and worried about getting concrete burns on their legs and their arms. So whenever I hear somebody say, well, we've always done it this way, to your point a minute ago, right, just drives me nuts, right? Because this is something kind of new for the trade. But how do you take the feedback you get from these happier workers, I'm going to say it, who haven't been removed from the workforce, but just kind of reallocated? How do you encourage this amongst the trades so that they start looking for opportunities, not just Mortenson?
Yeah, I'm gonna start, and then I'm gonna let Justin finish because I'm gonna start by talking about the precast duct banks that you saw. And we've been in the process of that product for about 18 months now. But in the very early versions of that, a lot of the development of how that product was constructed came from daily feedback from the men and women who were making it in the factory. So we started making products, and at the end of the day, we would have a plus minus session. What went well, and what could we change tomorrow? What could we try tomorrow that would make us more efficient, that might make us safer, that would make the operation better? And so the development of that product actually came from the people who were making it. It wasn't by the people sitting behind a computer screen. It was the people with the hammers in their hands and the pump hose, that were operating the concrete.
Yeah.
The culture, though, that has created, which is what I want Justin to elaborate on, is you saw also the precast grade beams, which is separate. So the duct banks are for electrical conductors, and the grade beams are part of the building structure. And that story is more about a trade partner on their own that took the initiative to develop a manufactured product because of the culture on the job site. And Justin, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that.
I think ultimately it kind of stems from, as we continue this journey, we can't do it from our chairs as armchair quarterbacks. You have to respect that craft so much and involve them. And something that we've done is what we call our RPI events, our rapid process improvement events. And that's where we actually bring the craft in with us and actually walk through what is the best way to do things and give them that voice and their ideas and celebrate those. And an example that we were talking about, that precast grade beam, we've been doing that since our first build within the Meta program. And it's new, and it's hard to get other concrete contractors to go down that journey because they are used to TJ, like saying this is the old way of doing things. But something that we've done based off of our flow scheduling and tax scheduling is some testimonials from the craft, right? Putting them in front of all of our trade partners and having a testimonial, a panel up there saying, just tell us your feedback. What is your honest feedback on what we're doing? And survey them. And once they hear it from the craft, and they kind of, because the craft gets that aha moment, their leadership really starts to drive in and say, hey, what can we do different? Because this is what our craft is telling us. This is what the other trade partners craft is telling us. So we highly encourage, once again, everybody to really dive into respecting the craft and giving them a voice and listening to them, because that's where it all starts. And they have some great ideas out there. And if you can grab onto that, you're going to be very successful.
Love what I'm hearing, man. This is such cool stuff. So one of the questions came up, and I knew it was coming, right? Hey, answers what in it for me, what's in it for me is, do you have statistics on prefab? Has it dropped levels of injuries, near misses? And before you move on, I will say that in my experience, this is what the owners are listening for, right? The owners expect to see the concrete truck and the pump out there, and you're going to deliver something to the site. They're going to say, well, what's going on here? So have you guys been able to prove, are you looking at trends where this intervention has started getting less sons and daughters hurt at work?
Yeah, I'll start there. Again, the statistic we have the most information on right now is the precast duct bank. And a little background, the Meta program, we have the ability, it's unique because we build the same product multiple times. Not only ourselves, but our general contractor co-opetition partners build the same building. And so the statistics that are available is quite unique in my career, that you rarely build the same building twice and have the same work done twice. So it's sometimes the data can be ambiguous, or there could be too many caveats to the data. But because we've built the same product several times, we were actually able to compare when we installed the precast duct bank the first time, which we installed right around 1,000 pieces of that. So 1,000 pieces that were 20 foot long each piece. We studied the same scope of work from a previous project, identical scope of work. On that project, we had 17 safety incidents, either near misses or actual, safety exposures or incidents that happened. Most of that was slips, trips, and falls. Some of it was trench exposure. When we did the precast work, same exact scope of work, we went from 17 to 0. And that included the work inside the factory. So both the work inside the factory and the installation of that same work in the field, we went from 17 to 0. Now the exposure did change. The exposure with the precast has now become caught between and pinched, or you're dropping the piece of precast on your toe. So now your precast daily planning is different because you're needing to look out for different safety exposures. But I think the team did a great job of understanding that and making sure they were ready for it. And it's, that was a really, for me, an astounding improvement. I don't know what that is percentage wise, but it's a lot, right? 17-0 is an amazing improvement, I think.
Yeah, and to pile onto that, with the 17-0, when we first started at Scope out here and we were stick building all the telecom duct bank, there was around 50,000 craft hours that were associated with that install, just specifically to the duct bank. And on the third build on the build that we implemented, there was around 30,000 craft hours that would be associated with the stick build. But we were doing that first build with 30 to 40 electricians in the field on the first build for those 50,000 hours. On the build that we got to 0 on, we did that with 8 electricians in the field. So we went from a 30 electrician count to an 8 electrician count. And to your point earlier, the comment made, TJ, of every time you increase the amount of labor on site, you're going to increase the amount of safety concerns and issues. And so by removing that to a controlled environment to where you're, and Jason hit on it, managing the high risk activity of placing the duct bank in a different manner and exposure, but ultimately the amount of people that you reduce in that amount of safety incidents overall.
And back to worker comfort, right? You also don't have 30 people trying to stay out of the wind in the Calb, wherever you are, right? Asking those guys to do that day after day. There's other benefits here that are less tangible. So one of the questions, we have about 7 minutes left. One of the questions that kind of came up here that I think I want to discuss was the impact on, especially in the clients that we have, sustainability is a big thing. Lead points, right? How can we get lead by reduction of waste or not using materials more than once? I'm not sure which of you can cover this. It's been something that's important to me because I'm sure you guys know we got lead credits for prevention through design a couple of years ago through NIOSH. And have you been able to find opportunities using either lead or waste reduction? Austin, Justin, you're shaking your head, so have at it.
I can let Jason take it because he actually did some numbers on concrete.
Awesome.
But I'll let Jason take it. But absolutely, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I'm gonna start and go to the. We've talked a lot about the duct banks, and I'm gonna hit that. But I want to focus a little bit on the wall panels that you saw. And what you saw was manufactured wall panels in a factory. And if you think about the image that we shared, there was a craft worker on a stool installing some electrical work. Everything was neat, clean, and what you didn't see was a lot of waste in metal studs. You didn't see a lot of waste in drywall because we've optimized those panels to optimize the material. So we're starting with the material. So in other words, if a piece of drywall comes and it's 4 feet wide and 14 feet tall, then the panel is 8 feet wide and we don't cut any drywall. It's not only a cost savings, but it's a sustainability savings, and it's a labor savings because now we don't have to expend that labor. When we don't expend labor, then we obviously decrease safety exposures. And if we're not cutting metal studs, then again, we're eliminating safety exposure there also. So those have been, the sustainability impact there has been around optimizing the product so that we're not cutting and wasting, because every time that we cut, we waste. On the concrete, we actually stumbled upon this one, quite honestly. We were looking at images of a piece of precast, which is built in a form. And so if the piece of precast is 2 feet wide and 2 feet tall, you pour only enough concrete to make that dimensional shape. If you have placed concrete duct bank in the field, you traditionally oversize that. You dig a large trench and then you just fill it up with concrete. And if you actually, I wish I had the image to share, but if you looked at the side-by-side image, all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, there's a lot more concrete that we're putting in the ground than if we poured into a form. And we actually studied it based on the batch tickets from the concrete trucks. It was 2 times as much concrete from the control sample that we started with to when we used the precast. And when we extrapolate that, it worked out to over 1 million pounds of CO2 offset, that like the embodied carbon that we did not put in the project because just by merely putting in less concrete. So now we're actually looking at other concrete additives to try and reduce that. There's actually been some exploration around geofoam duct banks for some of our fiber optic work, not around our medium voltage, but like, could we get to a more of a foam-based solution? It is at the forefront of Meta's mind, and so that puts it at the forefront of our mind too. So every product that we try to develop, we're always thinking about what's the sustainable impact of that.
You know, the farmer in me also sees you don't have to rinse out concrete trucks. You don't need as many concrete trucks or that carbon footprint. In California, Southwest, where you pay for water, I cannot imagine the savings of not having to use water to make so much more concrete than you actually need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the sustainability. So just kind of wrap up here. We've got a few minutes left. I'm going to stick with you on this one, Jason. And the last question is one I came up with. So you have a customer that wants to build $1 billion data center that you've never worked for him, and he has no idea, or they have no idea of the best way to build. What are 2 or 3 things, top of your head, that the client should kind of be searching for or listening for, so that when you build that facility for them, it's going to be world class with these new prevention through design interventions? Well, 2 or 3 things.
Yeah, I would say, actually, I'll start with one I would be listening for from my customer, which is their motivation. And I'm going to stick specifically to prevention through design and manufactured products. I'm going to narrow my answer today just a bit. The first thing I'm going to listen for is their motivation to do that. And manufactured products have great benefits. But if the singular motivation for a manufactured product is cost, and we take everything else off of the table, it will not meet the needs of that motivation. Eventually it may, but it is like bringing a new product into a very antiquated industry. It's going to take time before we see the benefits on things like cost. But the immediate impacts, like safety, if that's a motivator, which it is for our customer, when I've shared images of the wall panels that we showed, most of the initial reactions are, wow, that's going to be a lot safer to do than working off of a lift at 15 feet in the air. That gets me excited as a builder to have a customer who is tuned into the real benefits of what these types of things can provide. So that's what I would be listening for. If I was advising the customer, what should they be thinking about is labor availability and how they solve the labor equation, because the projects of this scope and size take an enormous amount of craft labor. And we are continuing to suffer from a shortage of craft labor availability in our industry. And so these, like I said in the video, it's over 500 trades on each project in skilled trades: electrical, plumbing, sheet metal, pipe fitters. These are highly technical trades, and at some
we just don't have a lot of them left.
We just don't have them, and so now it's kind of it's a war for talent at the craft level stage, and so helping them to find a solution to solve that particular equation is one of the biggest things I would advise them to figure out as they.
That one really sticks out, Jason. I never really considered the effect on less workers doing probably the same amount of work. Justin, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and then we're going to wrap this up. But what are your thoughts, Justin? 2 or 3 things that you think an owner would find extremely exciting about this approach?
I think ultimately I think Jason hit it on the head too. It's especially if you're building $1 billion project, right? Their lenses are going to be focusing on, what is going to be the safest way to do things. And by showing them these are means and methods and get them excited about that, I think that then that would encourage them to go to the design team to work with the GCs, the trade partners, to do those things. So, and then I was just going to reflect personally on, I'm okay with, sometimes I feel maybe it's not the right answer. I'm okay with the limited amount of resources. And the reason I say that means that you're forced to think outside the box how to do things. And when you're forced to think outside the box to do things, you're going to do things with safety in mind.
Yep.
And so that's what excites me. And it excites the owner too, especially our owner, about that. I mean, we have the labor constraints, but at the same time, if you eliminate labor on site, you're going to eliminate hazards on site. And
Yeah.
and you can do these things with a lot less people if you just think outside the box, and the owners get excited about that. If I can ask the owner to do one thing, is think of it with how you're going to do more with less, and that's going to create better outcomes.
Cool. Listen, Justin, Jason, this is awesome, right? We should play this for every contractor in the US. I want to thank you both for stepping up. Again, if there's any other questions, we're going to get back to you on those. I'm going to send you some of the quotes I gathered from both of you two, but at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Ed. Ed, if you can wrap up your thoughts on this workshop, it's all yours.